the minute you started talking about prison populations and the mentally ill, it immediately brought to mind for me the Eugenics Project, and that's one piece of Vermont history that everybody needs to know, is that this state was instrumental, along with other states in the Union, in creating what started as a research project to understand human diversity and turned into a project to erase human diversity. There's a book called Breeding Better Vermonters. It was not accidental, it was an intentional process. And when you start talking about births and deaths and marriages and people looking for themselves, I think, well, how many people are not recorded in those births and deaths and marriages? Because Vermont actively tried to eliminate anybody with a mental illness, anybody who was part of the prison population, anybody who was mixed race, anybody who was African, anybody who was Indian, anybody who had a genetically inherited disease, anybody who did not fit into the ideal of what in the 19-teens and 20s was considered the perfect American and the perfect Vermonter. Vermont is one of the whitest states in the country in terms of population, and I'm no offense to my French people who are 40% of the population, but many of that 40% are probably mixed race people. And many of them are probably Native people who learned when they were children to say, I ain't Indian, I'm French. French Canadian, that's what they called us. The other thing I'd like to say on that note is that we actually haven't moved past that era. And the minute you brought up 1909 and 1959, what that brings to mind for me is that in 1909, the people who organized the pageants actually tried to do it right. They recruited Native people, and literally hundreds of Mohawk and Huron and a handful of Abenaki people from Canada did participate. And so when that pageant came down into Lake Champlain, the Indians on that boat were real Indians portraying Indians. Of course, they were in Western Plains costumes, which was what you did at the time. But the tragedy is that when they came to Burlington, the audience included Indians who were afraid to put on those costumes. And so there's also that deep division between Native communities who were able to be out and upfront about who they were and Native communities who were forced to hide, given the social circumstances they grew up in. Many people don't know that the Ku Klux Klan was very active in Vermont in the early 20th century, not just against Africans or blacks, but against Indians as well, against anyone of mixed race. And many people also don't realize that in 1959, when the Champlain anniversary came around again, this time the people in the boats wearing feathers and skins were white boys from the Boy Scouts and other scouting organizations who thought it was perfectly okay to dress up and pretend to be Indians because there were no real Indians left anymore, were there? So let's just take that over.
But the boats were made by Canadian.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. The boats were real, but the people were fake. So all of that sort of swirls through my mind, and even coming up on this anniversary in Burlington, it's been a very difficult process. It's been fraught with hard feelings on all sides. The simple truth is that there are a number of Abenaki bands today, and they don't all get along with each other. And in many cases, it's due to what happened in their parents' and their grandparents' generation. It's due to what happened in the schools they grew up in. It's due to what happens between their families. And much of it is aided and abetted by the states and federal agencies that refuse to acknowledge them or embrace them. And so, in a positive note, what I'd like to say is that this is where places like the Vermont Folklife Center have been just remarkable. This is where arts organizations have opened their arms. Even though it is illegal for Native people in Vermont to identify themselves as Indians when they make arts and crafts, it's actually a violation of federal law. Vermont Folklife Center says, so what? We know who you are. We'll support you. And so I think sometimes that's what we have to start thinking about, is where can we reach across these structures and boundaries and bits of legislation that have been designed to separate us, and where can we figure out how we can help each other up, how we can assist each other. The University of Vermont does an amazing program of enculturating people who have adopted Native children so they can figure out how to raise those children with Native cultural values. Those cultural values can be taught in the universities, they can be taught in the schools, and it doesn't have to be a form of appropriation. It can be a form of accommodation and a form of adaptation. And so I guess I would like to just sort of stop there to leave room if anybody wants to ask me a specific question on anything before I leave. because there are so many things I can say, but you know, as my sister here says, I am only one person. I do not speak for all Abenaki. I do not in any way speak for all Native American people. I can share with you my experience and what I've been exposed to, and I can give you some insights, but there are as many diverse Native voices as there are diverse voices of any other ethnicity and any other family you can possibly imagine.
Thank you so much.